Hi, Soc125 students. I am going to do a little mini lecture to give you an overview of some of the material you've already, some sort of a theoretical overview or way to look at and digest some of the material you've already covered, and also to prepare you for material that's coming up in this module. So I'm going to talk about Emil Durkheim. So this is a person that you've already covered in Intro to Sociology, presuming you took Intro to Sociology. If not, then here's the introduction to Durkheim. And so he is one of the founders of sociology, one of our sort of founding fathers. So the three people that are usually highlighted are Emil Durkheim, Karl Marx, and Max Weber. So all of these guys are going to be, I'll introduce the other guys to you guys if you haven't been introduced to them yet. So we're going to talk about Emil Durkheim. And normally the way I do this lecture when I'm talking about some of the fundamental concepts that he talks about is I kind of play a game with the students where I ask some questions. And so, but since I don't have the whiteboard, you guys are in front of me, I'm going to ask the questions, let you think about it. We're still going to play the game, and then I'm going to give you the answer. So Durkheim was the first, he's sort of giving credit as being the first demographer. So there's controversy on that later on, but no worries. We're going to give him credit for being the first demographer, and demography is a study of human populations. And so he wrote a book called Suicide. And there he showed that there were different rates of suicide in different parts of Europe and according to different kind of criteria. So here, I'm going to start playing my game with you. So, and this is over 100 years ago. Let's say about 150 years ago is when he would have collected the data and analyzed it. So let's see. Who has a higher suicide rate? Who would you think would have a higher suicide rate? Would it be women or men? All right, take your guess, write it down, and test yourself and see how good you guess. How about Protestants versus Catholics? Who would have a higher suicide rate? Next, married people or unmarried people? Who would have a higher suicide rate? So now you've written it all down and you have your guesses. And normally I'd ask people why they guess the way they guess, and I'll just tell you things that people say. So they'll tell me Catholics have a higher suicide rate because they're more depressed or something, right? So maybe, let's see, they would say women have a higher suicide rate because women are more prone to depression, maybe, or because, back in those times, women were very oppressed, so they would have a higher suicide rate. Depending on the class, sometimes I'll get entire classes that'll say, of course, it's married people, because of course being married would make you depressed, right? And so, I like to, and then I go through all the reasons, and sometimes people will give other answers. And so they'll say the single people would have a higher rate of depression because they don't have anybody, right? So they start giving reasons, right? So, but I'm going to tell you the answer. Durkheim found that Protestants had a higher suicide rate than Catholics. Now, when I was in graduate school and I learned this, I was like, well, or I was reading, I think I'd already read it, before, but anyways, I'm reading it again, and I'm seeing that Catholics have a lower suicide rate. And I'm like, well, duh, of course Catholics would have a lower suicide rate because it's a sin. It's a mortal sin to commit suicide. So why would, if you're miserable now, why would you want to take your life and then you'd be in hell or purgatory, right, for eternity? I don't know how it works, but not a good deal, right? So I'm thinking that would be the prohibition. But that wasn't what Durkheim pointed out. But let me go to the next one. So who has the higher suicide rate, women or men? Men have the higher suicide rate. And it's true that women today, because one of the things I'll point out is that this pattern still holds true today. So that women do try to commit suicide more, or there's more suicide attempts, but when men commit suicide or try to commit suicide, they tend to be more successful. There's jokes there, but I'm not going to make them. So, yeah, let me not do that. So women try more, but men actually use more lethal force, and so they actually are more successful at committing the suicide, and so they have the higher suicide rate. And then the last one would be unmarried versus married, and it's unmarried people have a higher suicide rate. So those people that did speculate that the single people may be lonelier, there is something about being unattached. So in fact, what Durkheim said was the common variable was individualism. So those populations with higher rates of individualism had higher rates of suicide. Okay, so this is going to be a really important concept for you to keep in mind, and you can apply it